News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are Miguel Delaney from The Independent and James Olley from ESPN. Welcome to you both. Let me run you through the back pages before we chat. Wins from Newcastle and Chelsea as well. They also feature quotes from Harry Brook, who admits he made a terrible mistake during an altercation with a nightclub bouncer in New Zealand. In the Telegraph, more from England's white ball captain in that paper as well, as he admits he was lucky to keep his job as captain. More Champions League in the Times as well, plus news of Jamie George's retirement after the Rugby World Cup and comments from Emma Raducanu after her defeat at the Australian Open tennis. James, Miguel, great to see you as always. Looking forward to chatting Champions League. It's been a really decent night for Premier League teams, English teams in Europe tonight. We'll start with Liverpool on the back page of the Mirror. They've gone with the headline, "Like a Boz, Dom gets Reds jumping as they slot back into gear." It felt like a significant victory, this one, Miguel, considering all the pressure that the manager's under and the fact that they've been criticised for some of their performances in recent weeks.
Yeah, both the result and the performance. I mean, it did feel, I think myself and James were both at the 0-0 draw at Arsenal. And in the second half, they were a bit more like the Liverpool that we know. Obviously, there was a bit of a step back at the weekend. But, given the pressure, given maybe there was a feeling that recent results in the Premier League could have led to a situation where they would really struggle at Marseille and maybe then have a proper fight to finish in the top 8, it ended up being quite a comfortable night and something that's needed for momentum. I suppose just to kind of stabilise the team and maybe get them thinking about the Champions League, even if that doesn't sound too outlandish given the way the season has gone. But I mean, obviously we'll get into this as we talk more about the Champions League. It was also another game where you might say a quote-unquote crisis Premier League club actually ended up having quite a comfortable night in Europe, which maybe says something about this Champions League group stage.
Maybe. James, it was a really well-taken free kick from Szoboszlai. You wondered when he was lining up with the ball, was it going to be him? Was it going to be Mo Salah? And speaking of Mo Salah, back in the starting 11 tonight, was that a significant moment? Is it time now to perhaps draw a line under this saga?
Yeah, look, I mean, the fact that the headlines tonight are not about Mo Salah is another win for Arne Slot, isn't it, really? The fact that he's been able to just ease him back into the team on a night when they've played well, obviously got the win, put themselves in a very strong position in the Champions League, just eases the sort of difficulty around Salah and his future, and the fact that there's still, 10 days to go in the January window. I think that speculation probably isn't going to go away until the window closes and everybody knows where they are until the summer. But yeah, I mean, look, that performance, obviously with Salah as part of it, was just, there was a bit of freedom of expression in there that they've not really shown always in the Premier League. That Szoboszlai free kick, those kind of free kicks under the wall had almost gone out of the game when you got to a point a couple of years ago where, all these teams were seeing that and then having, defenders sort of lying down under the wall to sort of stop that from happening. It was almost a bit of a throwback. But, even sort of the pace that Frimpong showed for the second goal, and I thought Szoboszlai was really good all night, actually. And it's just a real shot in the arm for Arne Slot, as Miguel said there. And just the fact that Salah's not the focal point will really help them as they look to kick on from here.
And Miguel, with Liverpool being off the pace in the Premier League, they're up to 4th now in the Champions League table. Does that mean that they will perhaps start to prioritise this competition now?
I mean, look, the modern history of the Champions League, especially since the millennium, with Liverpool maybe being the biggest example of this in 2005, there has been a trend of teams who haven't necessarily done that well in the domestic league suddenly kind of rallying. It's as if kind of the quality they haven't been showing, there's almost a kind of a breathing space for it in Europe, where suddenly they can focus their energies. Now maybe it's a little bit different because at the moment it does look like that fight for a Champions League place in the Premier League could be quite tight. But yeah, there has been a precedent there. It's maybe gone away a little bit in the recent Champions League, where we've seen kind of really dominant sides at the top of the league winning trebles and things like that, including City, Real Madrid winning a double, Paris Saint-Germain winning everything last year. But I do wonder, given so much of the talk in football right now is about the schedule and the effects of the schedule, not least a Champions League game like this in January, whether that actually, a bit like what happened when they first expanded the Champions League back in 2000, and we saw teams who finished fourth or fifth regularly win it, like Liverpool, whether there could be a bit of a reversion to that now, and certainly whether it's actually going to be more difficult to compete on 2-3 fronts the more seasons go, as teams have to adapt to this ridiculous schedule, because January and February have suddenly become like the kind of, January used to be quite an open month because there was no football. Teams used to often go on mid-season breaks to the south of Spain or Dubai. Now there's no space for that, and it could actually serve a team that aren't right in a title race.
Yeah. I mentioned it was a good night for English teams. It was a comprehensive win for Newcastle as well against PSV. 3-0 winners for them. And Johan Wissa got himself on the score sheet in his Champions League debut, James. How impressive was this Newcastle performance, considering penultimate game of the Champions League group phase, and they've got PSG up for their final game?
Yeah, I mean, it's the start of a massive run, isn't it, for Newcastle? They've got Villa, you've got PSG, as you say, then I think they've got Liverpool, and then I think they've got City in the second leg of the EFL Cup. So it's the start of a huge period for them. And look, you know, the front three all scored, and I'm pleased with Visser, actually, because he obviously came in difficult circumstances. He had to wait a long time to get his move. It was sort of the back end of the whole Alexander Isak saga, where he ended up going to Liverpool right at the end of the window, and he's had injuries and difficulties to contend with. And Voltemada's had to sort of carry the burden in an attacking sense or a sort of goal-scoring sense for Newcastle. And he's starting to hit his stride, and I think that's, you know, it's obviously going to benefit Newcastle going forward.
What did you make of Harvey Barnes' performance, Miguel, and the fact that he got himself on the score sheet? And there seems to be a bit of a tussle going on where he might pledge his allegiance ahead of the World Cup as well.
Yeah, he's got a big decision to make, but of course, I mean, form like this is only going to help, given, I mean, we saw it recently in the game against Leeds United as well. He is one of those players on an upward curve for Newcastle just at the moment they need it. I mean, there was the flip side of what was a good night was a kind of maybe the slight concern over Bruno Guimaraes' injury, and this is going to be a consequence of this schedule. But Barnes, yeah, he does have that decision to make, but I mean, the overtures are going to be stronger when he's playing like this.
Yeah, it really is. OK, let's go back to the back page of the Mirror. We're talking Chelsea. I wouldn't say a comfortable win, but they did get the 3 points they needed against Champions League debutants Paphos, beating that Cypriot side 1-0 at Stamford Bridge. You can see the back page there where they mention it on the sidebar. Caicedo finds path to glory on the back page of the Mirror. For Chelsea, this felt pretty significant, considering, James, that it was Liam Rossini's first Champions League game as manager.
Yeah, and he's got a job to win the fans over. I don't think it's sort of any secret of that. They weren't particularly enamoured with his appointment, and you know, he's got to hit the ground running. And look, they've got Napoli away in their last game next week, and anything other than a win here would have been a disaster for Chelsea, really. Napoli, of course, could go out of the whole competition themselves. They're really struggling to just get into the playoffs. So, you know, I think it was the 21st shot they had tonight that they scored. It was sort of attack v defence for long periods, but I don't think the football was particularly good. Sometimes it's difficult, I suppose, in those circumstances when you get a team that just comes to defend and doesn't have much interest in trying to go forward. But yeah, it's really vital for Rossini that he starts getting these wins sort of consistently. I think just to get everybody behind him, because we've sort of seen how the Chelsea job can swallow managers up, and it does feel as though he's sort of fighting from behind a little bit with the kind of consensus around him.
So after this latest round of fixtures, as it stands, 5 of the 6 English clubs are in the top 8 of this Champions League phase, Miguel. Does this suggest to us that the English teams are really dominating? And what's helping them? Is it this new format?
I mean, it's the format, but the format is really a kind of, I suppose, a consequence of the main reason that they're being helped, which is, I suppose, football's financial system and just how much wealthier Premier League clubs are than the rest of Europe. That's the reason for this. Hence, you know, so many Premier League clubs can just go and pick off the best players from Serie A, from La Liga, from pretty much any other league. And like the strength and depth of the league is so strong now. And like that's been, I have to say, it's been a real takeaway. I mean, especially at this group stage, which I felt last season it was flat. UEFA were very quick to proclaim it a success. I didn't agree then. I agree less now. I mean, even I have to say, I was at the Spurs game last night. I mean, this might have been influenced by the fact I was drenched with the weather. But I was thinking, like, European football after Christmas, and especially the Champions League, It should be coming back into spring, and where you're actually kind of building up. There's a real sense of anticipation and excitement about knockout games. That's not the case with this, because of course clubs don't want to play these 2 extra games, but 2 extra games, that's not exactly the stakes like immediate knockout. And it does kind of lend a kind of a drab feel to all this, which is only accentuated then because the strength of the English team suddenly leads to games that are almost non-events. I have to say, like, given Spurs' form of late, I was actually a bit shocked last night by how easily they beat Dortmund and how shocked Dortmund felt or seemed to be at Spurs' press. Similar tonight with Marseille, they've been talked up a lot this season. De Zerbi's been talked up as a Manchester United coach, and Liverpool really fairly just dismissed him despite their own difficulties. The one thing I would say, though, is when it gets to the end of the competition, that or the part that we really care about, when it's interesting, where there's immediate knockout, there is the argument then that actually the Premier League's wealth causes a bit of an issue, because it does create almost this exhausting competitive intensity in the Premier League that does leave teams tired. And hence, I think England's only had 2 winners since 2019. And actually Dortmund, who got hammered or beaten badly by Spurs last night, they've been in a Champions League final more recently than the English team. So that's maybe where there is a little bit of a rebalance. But at the moment, we do potentially have a situation where all 6 English clubs could go through as part of the top 8.
Yeah, some great points made there, Miguel. And James, I kind of saw you nodding along to some points of that. Do you like the new system, this new league phase of the Champions League, or should we all just go back to where we were with the group phase?
The old system wasn't perfect, but it was better than this. I mean, I went to Milan last night. I was at Inter Milan Arsenal, and you know, always an absolute pleasure and a privilege of the job to be able to go to somewhere like the San Siro. But you're there kind of going, Arsenal have turned up tonight. They've made 7 changes, you know, against last season's runners-up, and they've won 3-1 fairly comfortably. And you're sort of thinking, what, you know, where's the jeopardy? Where's the kind of peril in these games? And what this format has done, I get it for the casual fan who may be sort of flicking through and thinking, oh, actually, oh, look, Inter Milan are playing Arsenal tonight, or oh, Real Madrid are playing PSG in the group stage, or where, you know, these kind of big clashes are taking place earlier on in the competition because of the league format, this new league format. But it's diluted the sort of meaning of those games, and you sort of find yourself, I'm sure Miguel's the same, you find yourself coming away from these matches thinking, well, what do we write here? I mean, what does any of this really mean? No one. Okay, it builds towards match day 8, and match day 8 is going to look great again for TV, for everyone sat at home, all the kickoffs at the same time, the sort of live table, it's all going to look great. But the price that is being paid for that one night of fantastic televisual viewing seems to be, to me, too great to have weeks and weeks where, you know, they sort of always said, oh, there won't be any dead games. Well, there are dead games. There are plenty of dead games. And there are games that, because the sort of dilution is so great, that the teams don't really know where they stand until probably about this point, really. And then it's only then that as a sort of serious fan, you can get properly invested in it.
Yeah, there's been so many mixed reviews about this new format. Be interesting to kind of get a general consensus of what the fans think. But James, Miguel, for the moment, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in The Guardian. We're going to be talking golf. Rory McIlroy challenges the live pair of Tyrrell Hatton and Jon Rahm to pay their DP World Tour fines. That's next. It's appeared that Jean-Philippe Mateta, their star striker, has indicated to the club that he wants to leave. Miguel, this has been what a crazy few months it's been for Palace. After one of the greatest days in the club's history in May, winning the FA Cup, they've sold their star player in Eze, they've sold their captain in Guehi, they've been embarrassed in the FA Cup by being knocked out by a non-league team. The manager has announced that he's leaving at the end of the season as well, and on top of that, they're no longer winning games. I mean, where has it all gone wrong? I suppose we can start with the Mateta line, and it almost seems like, well, of course he wants out. He perhaps feels that the club doesn't have the ambition that he's looking for, and he wants to play for the biggest teams in the Champions League now, it would seem.
Well, I suppose it's not the ambition per se, it's more the financial possibilities, as in like our Crystal Palace's financial power. And we were talking about the Champions League just before the break. And this actually is connected to that, especially because it's expected that Mateta will go to Juventus. I mean, what is the modern Champions League but the Super League by stealth? It's been created because a lot of the super clubs want to get that sort of Super League money. And so what that does in football's like economic climate is basically, as soon as a good story comes along from a club outside that, which Palace were, well, the kind of financial pressures of the game, but they just crush that joy so quickly. I mean, like, one of the reasons that Glasner has had so many issues this season, of course, is because he's losing players. And he's losing players because Palace are good, and because these days, far quicker than it was 20 years ago, as soon as you have a good team, it's basically asset stripped quicker than ever. And that is the main reason for Palace basically being where they are now, where joy is turned into kind of trepidation about what next. And Mateta, obviously, from his own perspective, he wants to go to the World Cup. That's his main ambition, and feels that obviously playing for a Champions League club, expected to be Juventus, although there is talk of some English interest, that will help him get there. That's the brutal reality of it.
Yeah, but it's weird, isn't it? Because for years, Crystal Palace has been seen as a feeder club. That's not to be disrespectful, but they are good. They do develop players well, and then usually they are sold on for a profit. OK, I want to take you to the back page of The Sun. Mateta eyes Jan exit, right at the top of the page there. And Jack Ross, a friend of the show, makes the point that Aston Villa are also interested in the £40 million rated striker, while Italian giants Juventus have already made approach that's been rejected by the Eagles. That's a lot of money for a player that cost them just £15 million 5 years ago, James.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy with Palace, you know, and the situation that Miguel describes. But there is another issue here, which is the valuations of players. I mean, for example, obviously Glasner was very disappointed by losing Mark Guehi when he did. But I mean, they tried to price Mark Guehi out of a move for the last couple of years. Obviously, in the summer, he almost went to Liverpool, but my understanding is that he's been very, very clear for a long time that he wouldn't sign a new contract at Palace. And whether they thought they could convince him, whether they thought maybe, you know, winning the FA Cup might change his mind, or that they would have something in their arsenal to convince him to sign, that's only for Palace to answer. But the fact is, they kind of allowed the situation to develop to the point where they took City at 20 million and got 15 less than they could have got from Liverpool in the summer, and a lot more than a lot less than they could have had a year earlier if they'd sold him when he had longer to go on his contract. And you know, they're in a situation now with Mateta where they're sort of quoting what is, you know, quite a sizable fee, especially in the January market. I suspect he probably will go. I suspect he probably won't go for 40 million. But again, at the moment, from what we're told and what we're reading tonight, Palace are quite adamant that that's the fee they're going to hold out for. But what are they going to do then? They're going to hold on to a player who's not happy, who's at a club where, you know, they've lost key players, the manager's going at the end of the season, and you do start to wonder, what is the point really of Glasner staying? Everybody knows he's going. The team is being essentially run down to a point where they're going to have to start again in the summer, and you've got a manager who arguably doesn't really want to be there. So, you know, if they lose Mateta on top of Guehi, on top of obviously Eze and Elise and all these players that they've sold in the last couple of years, it's going to be a miserable 4 or 5 months for Palace until they can get to the summer, hopefully invest some of this money and rebuild under a new manager.
Yeah, doesn't sound overly positive, but Crystal Palace fans, of course, there's still a chance of silverware in the Conference League, of course. And football is unpredictable. The transfer window's still open. Bring in some players, improve results. Hopefully get yourself back up the Premier League table. I'm trying to put a positive spin on it for you. OK, let's move to golf. Back page of The Guardian. Ryder Cup warning. McIlroy challenges live pair Hatton and Rahm to pay fines. This story from Ewan Murray. Rory McIlroy has challenged Tyrrell Hatton and Jon Rahm to demonstrate their commitment to the Ryder Cup cause by settling fines for their Live Golf participation. And these were the fines, of course, sanctioned to them by the DP World Tour. Rahm and Hatton have both appealed these sanctions and their fines, but a date for that appeal yet to be decided. And Miguel, it feels like McIlroy, once again, who's obviously over the years been very outspoken about Liv, making a very public statement here about two of his Ryder Cup friends. Yeah,
a return to form, if you like, given it has felt he's been a bit quieter on some of these issues over the last while. He's emboldened, of course, by victories. And also, to be fair, there's maybe an element of being a team player here, given he wants these two teammates to have their situations solved. As you say, he has been very outspoken about Liv in the past. I must say, that's something that I really admire about McIlroy, given so many elite sports stars, so many sports stars I just don't want to get involved in these sort of discussions. He will. There is an argument, I suppose, on the other side that, one of his best years coincided when he was fully focused on golf. And that given he has already said what he's going to say on a lot of this, but I suppose it does feel like with McIlroy, put a microphone in front of him, ask him that sort of question, and there's an element that he can't help himself. But I suppose there is another dimension to this, which is, of course, Team Europe.
Yeah, of course. OK, let's talk cricket and back page of the Daily Telegraph. Leading with Brooke here, Harry Brooke saying, "I was lucky to keep my job. I made a terrible mistake." And this comes amid accusations, constant accusations, that there is a drinking culture within England men's cricket. He says he was lucky to keep his job, James. Do you agree?
Yeah, he was. I mean, you only need to look at... I mean, the example he's got is Ben Stokes in 2017 when he had an issue outside a nightclub in Bristol. Now, obviously, he was cleared in the end of that. But as a result of what happened there, Stokes was stripped of the vice-captaincy and he didn't go on the Ashes tour. And we've got to remember that this all happened before England went to Australia to play in the Ashes, and the ECB knew that. He reported that on the day of the one-day international in New Zealand there, and they kind of swept it under the carpet. And it really speaks to this wider issue at the moment around this England team, which is, where is the accountability? You know, at the moment, the sort of mood music coming out is that Rob Key, Brendan McCullum and Stokes may all stay in their roles leading that England team going forward. And you sort of think, well, you were beaten badly on the field. The preparation was a bit of a disaster off of it. And you've also got someone as talented as Harry Brooke, who clearly his decision-making was terrible in the Ashes. He was getting out with all sorts of rash shots, and clearly that decision-making was bad before the tournament in New Zealand. So you sort of think, well where are the people asking the difficult questions here? And for him to sort of escape from that, for them to brush it under the carpet for a while, for him to then speak about it now, but keep the role that he has, it just, you start to think, well, there needs to be a sort of tougher line with some of these players if they're going to fulfil their potential, because Harry Brooks is an absolutely fantastically talented batsman. People talk about him in the most grandiose terms. But clearly there's an issue there in terms of his discipline, his professionalism, and something that he has to improve on. At least, as I say, he's got Stokes as a captain and a leading light and example to follow, who can put this sort of incident behind him and go on and be one of the best in the world.
Yeah, and it's a crucial time for this England cricket team, isn't it, with the tour of Sri Lanka forthcoming, and obviously Brooke centre stage of that as the England captain. Miguel, James, thank you very much for your time on Back Pages tonight. A pleasure to have your company, as always. Now, if you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Back Pages at 1:30 p.m. The show is also